Russia wants to dominate the global energy market, and to do that, Putin is moving to harvest the Arctic region. I think it's safe to say that in this economic war, anything goes. The West, they are using financial sanctions and the dollar system to punish Russia, and Putin, he's fighting back, and his weapon of choice is commodities, specifically oil and gas. Consider what happened 2 weeks ago when Russia and Saudi Arabia cut production. They squeezed the oil markets by cutting over a million barrels per day. This caused the price of oil to fly up by 5% to reach a crazy high of over $94. It is an all-time high in 2023, and this is bad news for the West that needs inflation to drop. And the more the inflation pain ramps up, the greater the odds of more rate hikes, which pushes economies closer towards a recession. US CPI inflation has rebounded up to 3.7% because energy prices are starting to soar again. Then, out of nowhere, we have the ECB hiking interest rates to a record 4%. They are raising interest rates even though they are in a recession because inflation is just too high. And this is the economic power of energy supply. And Russia is moving to consolidate the enormous wealth lying beneath the Arctic. And here's how insane it really is. According to the EIA, the Arctic holds an estimated 90 billion barrels of oil under the ice. Beneath the glaciers lies 13% of the world's undiscovered oil reserves. In addition, 30% of global gas reserves also lie within the Arctic. So just imagine the financial and geopolitical power a country can get if they reach those resources first. And that's why we have major powers like the United States, the EU, and Russia all in this great Arctic race to harvest wealth. But here's where things get truly wild. Russia is already leading this rush, and they are combining efforts with China to secure natural gas from the region. In a report from Reuters, Russia's Arctic 2 LNG is set to start production during 2023, and this is an ambitious project that will extract the vast reserves of natural gas from the Arctic, exporting it to global markets. And understand what this means, guys. If Russia manages to control oil and gas in the Arctic, they will be on par with Saudi Arabia and Qatar in energy production. This will complicate the West's efforts to sanction Russia or impose any oil price caps. This Arctic rush is more than just about making money, it's about geopolitical control, power. The last 2 years have taught us this fact. Whoever controls commodities essentially controls the world. And during the Eastern Economic Forum, Putin gave an address, and I want us to focus on his speech about the Arctic. Russia is making frightening progress there. By 2030, LNG production in the Russian Arctic zone is expected to increase by 200% to 64 million tons per year. To accomplish this, a high-capacity LNG production center will be built in the region, as well as integrating the east and west pipelines in Russia. And this is a huge bump in gas production where Russia is already dominating. If we look at global gas production, we can see Russia comes in just behind the United States. They produce over 700 billion cubic meters of natural gas, accounting for 17.4% of global production. By 2030, this number could jump up to 800 billion cubic meters with LNG from the Arctic. However, there's a difference between US gas and Russian gas. America's production is mainly consumed domestically. In fact, less than 11% of America's gas production is exported to the world, while the majority from Russia is sold into global markets. So with Russia getting control of the Arctic LNG, they can swing the gas markets however they like, and this means increasing production to earn more revenue or cutting it to spike prices up. And if you think oil production cuts are the only weapon Russia has, it's time to add gas cuts to Putin's arsenal. And the problem the world has is an underinvestment in oil and gas. This obsession with going green fast is handing Russia the keys to the kingdom. Once again, if you control the production and export of energy, you essentially control global economic growth. In 2020, Russia approved a program to invest over $300 billion for their Arctic adventure. It's money used to build up infrastructure to harvest oil and gas beneath the ice. So how much return from this investment can Russia expect? Well, just the oil and gas alone are worth $35 trillion. We aren't even counting the vast amounts of gold and base metals that are in the North Pole. So Putin's Arctic investment could return 10 to 100 times the investment if everything goes well. And this will make Russia a bigger commodity superpower in the world. And this should be very frightening to the West, because containing Russia then will become virtually impossible. You cannot impose sanctions or oil price caps without Putin retaliating with production cuts. He will simply ramp up inflation in return. Not only can they keep selling to the BRICS countries, but they will also have the supply power as well. And that's why this Arctic race is just so important. And there's a reason why Russia is winning in the Arctic. Yes, they are investing a lot into the project, but it also has a lot to do with geography. And here's why. According to the Arctic Council, Russia stretches over 53% of the Arctic Ocean coastline. Approximately 2.5 million Russian inhabitants live within Arctic territory. They already have established a physical presence there, which means they aren't going to live. Looking at the Arctic Circle, we can see that the country with the most access to the Arctic is Russia. Other countries like Canada, the US, and Finland all have access to the Arctic, but Russia's positioning is simply superior. And with increased exposure means the ability to control the sea routes along the Arctic. Now, pumping out oil and gas is one thing, but if you can't transport the LNG or transport the oil, it is a grand waste of time. So Russia's positioning gives them near complete access to the Northern Sea route, which allows them to transport their energy from the Arctic to Europe or Asia with ease. And here's why this is critical. Without access to the Northern Sea route, any deliveries from the Arctic will have to go through Europe and enter the Suez Canal, and that poses big problems for Russia. The journey across the Suez to Asia is over 21,000 kilometers. It is essentially a world tour. Ships will also be traveling through Europe across various choke points that Russia would rather avoid. But with the Northern Sea route, this distance is cut by 40%. So Russia can now directly transport their oil and gas from the Arctic to Asia without heading west. They can sail east and sell their energy to China and India directly while saving time and money. The Northern Sea route is a game changer for Putin, and Russian vessels are already using this trade route. This is happening under our noses. In a story from Bloomberg, Russia sends oil through the Arctic again to speed up delivery to China. Sailing through the Arctic Sea cuts voyage to China by 30%. Now, I'm sure there are environmental concerns regarding this, but let's get real. Do you think Russia really cares about that? Their priority is dominating the energy trade routes. They need to get shipments to China faster to boost their revenue. And with this route, oil and gas shipments will be cheaper to Asia. Putin can reroute more energy towards his biggest customers and reduce reliance on Europe even further. So we can expect Russia to accelerate this development of their Arctic plan. They're going to produce more gas, they're going to produce more oil and ship it all the way to Asia because the EU is now an unreliable customer. Now, Europe still has incredible dependence on Russian LNG. Gas imports in the first 7 months were up by 40% versus the 2021 levels, but this won't last forever. The EU is moving to cut Russian energy away completely by 2027. So the clock is ticking for Putin. The Eurozone energy chief is pushing hard to curb Russian LNG imports. Now that will make the Eurozone inflation even worse for sure, but at this point they don't care. Their main aim is to decouple from Russia. And what Putin is trying to do is to create an Arctic economy. And that means transporting a ton of cargo through the Northern Sea route to Asia. And here's what he said during the forum. By 2030, we expect the general capacity of seaports in the Arctic waters to double. By the end of the decade, it is expected to reach 252 million tons. Putin wants to increase trade within the Arctic Sea to expand the Russian economy. But there's a big challenge. Take a look at this picture. This is a Russian nuclear-powered icebreaker. It is a necessary vessel to break apart the ice in the Arctic Sea. You have to send in these icebreakers periodically to cover a guiding route through the ice. You don't want your ship to get stuck or grounded amongst the sea ice, right? Now, the problem is that Russia doesn't have enough icebreakers and ice-class vessels for the Arctic Sea yet, so they are moving to shore up their weakness. By 2035, they plan to construct 50 more ice vessels specifically to utilize the Northern Sea route. And to build those vessels, Russia is turning to China, they are turning to India, and it's just a matter of time before they get their fleet of icebreakers and carve out a new trading route specifically for the global south. And this is why BRICS is a powerful economic bloc. Not only do you have manufacturing power, but now you also have trade routes and commodities from the Arctic Sea. Russia just delivered their first LNG cargo to China through the Arctic Sea. There isn't a need to go through the Suez Canal anymore during the summer months. Think of it this way. The Arctic route is basically a lifeline for trade between Russia and the global south. It is essentially a trade corridor that links Russia to China and the rest of Asia. So this is really an exciting time to be alive. We are literally seeing the formation of the multipolar world, and the big battleground is going to be the Arctic Circle. You have huge energy reserves underground, and whoever controls the region controls the sea route as well. They can control the polar Silk Road. With global warming accelerating, the polar ice caps are melting, and this opens up four major maritime routes. The Transpolar Sea Route is the most direct route, and that's the yellow line in the middle, but it is not yet feasible thanks to heavy ice. And this leaves three other sea routes. The Northwest Passage and the Arctic Bridge route are controlled by the G7 countries. It connects the US to Canada and the Eurozone through Finland, while the Northern Sea route is dominated by Russia because their landmass is simply too huge. And once the Northern Sea route gets developed, we'll see more oil and gas get pushed out from the Arctic to the global markets. And this is where de-dollarization fits into the puzzle. Russia isn't going to sell their cargoes in US dollars or euros, right? They will price it in rubles or the yuan. According to Novak, Russia has been receiving more energy payments in yuan and rubles. Beijing and Moscow also have an existing agreement to transact in local currencies for gas supply from Siberia. They are bypassing the reserve currency, and there's no going back. So just imagine once Russia develops their side of the Arctic Circle. There'll be tons of oil, there'll be tons of gas entering the markets, and they won't be sold in dollars. And the implications are extremely huge, especially if you combine this with China's BRI, the Belt Road Initiative. Now you have trade routes on land, you have trade routes on sea, and that can influence and shift trade away from Western currencies. And the West, they understand this threat. They are scrambling for countermeasure, but it might be too late. According to the Financial Times, Western nations fear China and Russia will exploit regional tensions on the Arctic. Because of the war, the Arctic Council is no longer cooperating with Russia. They fear having a polar region with no rules, and they are right to be afraid. The West is far behind, and they don't have the bandwidth to challenge Russia in the Arctic either. They are essentially 10 to 20 years behind. If we simply compare the number of icebreakers and vessels Russia has, they outnumber the entire NATO fleet combined. They have 57 ice-worthy ships compared to 47 from the entire West. So we gotta watch this space carefully. As global warming continues, the Arctic Circle will become the next economic arena. As it stands, Russia is winning by a mile. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Can the West catch up to Russia in the Arctic? Is this a game changer for the global energy markets? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.